All right, we are live. Hope you're doing good. Texans search for an offensive coordinator continues. It's the locker room, number one source for daily Texans digital content. Subscribe, like. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 610. So the Texans have a defensive coordinator. It is Matt Burke. I don't have massive thoughts on Matt Burke. I gave it a B. Because I trust D'Amico to handle the defense. So if D'Amico thinks that guy is a good guy to help him with the defense, okay. Not a great track record of calling defense going back to Miami. J.J. Watt speaks very highly of him. I know he worked with Robert Saleh, so I'm sure that one of D'Amico Ryan's mentors and Robert Saleh had a strong recommendation, as well as J.J. Watt. So that's that when it comes to defense. The real fun, though, is on the offensive side of the rock. And Kliff Kingsbury has become the polarizing figure of this discussion. And I thought Seth Payne, my colleague Seth Payne, who has a YouTube channel as well, did a really good job of providing the best counter argument for the case against Kliff Kingsbury. And I thought it was pretty strong by Seth. And we know what the biggest question is with Kliff Kingsbury. Biggest question is, does his offense work at the NFL level? And I think that's a fair question. Now, as a head coach, he's been a failure as a head coach. He wasn't good at Tech. Things didn't go well at Arizona. As a head coach, he's a disaster. But could he be a good coordinator at the NFL level? We've never really seen him just focus on offense. That's it, at least not at the NFL level. We saw it in college, but we haven't seen it at the NFL level. I will say this, and my biggest thing on Kliff Kingsbury is just the fact that we're talking about a guy who was an NFL head coach last year as a potential offensive coordinator, and he's going against Bobby Slowick from the Shanahan pipeline. I don't think you could have a better matchup when it comes to just the discussions that are being had, especially with what we've been used to the last 2 years, which was picking from a very thin line. Kliff Kingsbury wouldn't have even considered coming here and calling plays a couple of years ago. Just the fact that he came in town and talked about it, I think shows how far that things have come with the Houston Texans when it comes to who they're picking out. Now, maybe Kliff Kingsbury could be on the staff and Bobby Slowick's the offensive coordinator. That would be the dream scenario. Now, here I want to look at, though, D'Amico Ryans has talked about he wants to run the ball. And we'll get into Kliff Kingsbury and the quarterback history and all that type of stuff. I know a lot of people talk about, the history with Kliff Kingsbury and quarterbacks. Seth kind of hiked his leg on that. But let's just look at the ability to run the ball, and let's look at maybe the gray area of that. You can see here, these are the year by year, credit to Sporting News for the chart. These are the year by year offensive rushing ranks for Kliff Kingsbury. So 21st in rushing, or this is overall offense. We'll get into the rushing stuff in a second. So the yards per game in offense, it went from 21st to 6th to 8th, and then to 22nd. The 2022 season, I don't know how much you can blame him for that. I think that's kind of like how Mike Vrabel was a bad coordinator with the Texans. A lot of injuries, a lot of drama, all that type of stuff. But the yards rank went from 21st to 6th to 8th to 2nd. Kyler Murray's QBR went up every year except this year when you had all the drama and stuff like that. So I want to focus, though, on the rushing yards. Arizona in Kliff Kingsbury's 4 years in rushing yards, they were per game, they were 10th, 7th, 10th, and then 2nd. Now, is it a rushing philosophy? Is it the fact that you have Kyler Murray and Kyler Murray's making plays with his legs? The percentage of rushing yards that Kyler Murray had for Arizona during that stretch was 22, 36, 20, and 22%. So at least a fifth of those yards came from Kyler Murray. Now, does Kliff Kingsbury deserve credit for that design, or is that just Kyler Murray being a freak athlete and being able to tuck and run? So that's something that they're going to have to discuss. What would the philosophy be? Would there be some philosophies of the San Francisco Shanahan type of philosophy with Kliff Kingsbury? I don't know. I mean, it's possible. But as far as being an offensive coordinator, the case for and against, I thought Seth did a really good job. There's also the quarterback conspiracy theory that Kliff Kingsbury, it would mean that the Texans were committed to Bryce Young because Bryce Young's short and Case Keenum was short at Houston and Johnny Manziel was short at Texas A&M and Kyler Murray's short. Since when has that line of thinking really worked? Where you hire a coach with just the quarterback in mind. It didn't work in Arizona when they brought in Kliff just to work with Kyler. It didn't work in Denver when they hired an offensive coordinator trying to get Aaron Rodgers. I just don't think that is a philosophy that really works. And I don't think that the Texans would just be thinking about that, especially when they don't control whether they get Bryce Young or not, telegraph their thoughts on that. Now, I do think the fact that Kliff Kingsbury does have experience working with smaller quarterbacks and trying to overcome their flaws and the mistakes they may have, that could be beneficial if you do get a smaller quarterback like Bryce Young. But I don't think that you just hire an offensive coordinator just because you want to get a certain quarterback. That's not a good philosophy to have. So the case for and against Kliff Kingsbury, the case is we don't know whether he can be a good NFL offensive coordinator when he's just focusing on that because we haven't seen him do that. The case against is clear. You can make a case that he didn't maximize what Kyler Murray was. Some people would make that case. You can make a case that his offense doesn't necessarily work at the NFL level. And you can make a case that Bobby Slowick really is the better option, a guy who's unproven. The one thing that I think both sides can agree on, and Seth brought this up, and I brought this up yesterday on In the Loop on Sports Radio 610, 10 to 2 Central, Monday through Friday on Sports Radio 610 in the Odyssey app, home of the Houston Texans. Nobody's going to hire Kliff Kingsbury as a head coach. So you don't have to worry about Kliff Kingsbury leaving for some sort of head coaching gig. It's just not going to happen. Bobby Slowick, if Bobby Slowick comes in and it's the latest Shanahan guy that's just completely setting the world on fire, you're probably going to lose him in 2 or 3 years. I don't think you hire guys hoping you don't lose them in a few years. If you can tread coaches and continue to develop players and have guys learning under those coaches, it's a good thing. Don't ever hire based on insecurity that you could become some sort of pipeline. I think that's what U of H has done wrong here. They decided, well, we're tired of, coaches using this job to get prime opportunities that are more appealing with Art Briles and Sumlin and Tom Herman. So they hired Dana Holgerson. Don't let that scare you away. Like if you think Bobby Slowick's going to be gone in 2 years, that's fine. Find someone to study under him, just like Slowick did with Mike McDaniel and LaFleur, and boom, he's gone. And you try to keep stuff going. So it's a good case. But if you think Slowick's the better guy, don't let that scare you from hiring him. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. A lot of comments on here about Kliff Kingsbury. Joe Cruz, I'm no expert, but it seems like the air raid offense contradicts DeMeco's vision of being a physical team, imposing the running attack, and being a balanced, flexible team. We don't really know DeMeco's philosophy. Appreciate the comments. Keep the comments going. This is an interactive channel. We don't know DeMeco's offensive philosophy. The other thing that DeMeco has said is he's not married to a certain system, and he's not married to a certain style. So, yeah, I agree. Like in a perfect world, you think DeMeco wants to be physical. He wants to run the ball. But I also don't think DeMeco is going to pigeonhole himself into a certain type of offense. I think he's going to listen to the philosophies, and then he's going to adjust accordingly, and he's going to sprinkle his stuff in there. Richard says, I believe Kingsbury's offense is good. If you look at the stats with the Cards, he did pretty well except last season. Last season was a wash for me. I equate it to Mike Vrabel as a defensive coordinator with the Texans his 1 year. You can make a case that, he wasn't a good defensive coordinator. Well, he lost J.J. Watt, he lost Whitney Merciless, and they lost Deshaun Watson, so they had no signs of an offense. I would look at the first 3 years, but even then, they kind of drifted away at the end of the season. Now, is that his fault? And the other thing is, the case for Kingsbury, can guys learn from their mistakes? Some guys are just better coordinators than they are coaches. There's a big list of those guys: Romeo Crennel, Wade Phillips, Norv Turner. There's a lot of guys that are just better coordinators than coaches. Maybe Kliff Kingsbury is one of those guys. Maybe Kliff Kingsbury realizes, I'm just not an NFL guy. Maybe Kliff Kingsbury wants to come here and not oversee the offense. Maybe he just wants to observe and see what's going on. That'll be interesting to see. Cebu, didn't the Texans just announce Pep's firing and Kliff came into town, leaving Bally? Timing sure sounds like they've made a decision. Pep was going to be gone no matter what, but I do like where your head's there, in that they're interviewing these offensive coordinators and they're already getting rid of Pep Hamilton, or making it clear that they're going to get rid of Pep Hamilton. That would be the first sign that maybe they know which direction they're heading, whether it's either one, and Pep doesn't fit into it. Now, I think that was kind of a no-brainer that was what was going to happen. But yeah, I don't think Kliff Kingsbury or Bobby Slowick wants Pep Hamilton here. Pep had a good run as a quarterback coach, but it's not something that they want to continue. They want to continue running for. Daniel asks the question: what most popular names when it comes to head coaching openings? Why not Eric Bieniemy? Here's my thing with Eric Bieniemy. Sometimes the league just knows. Now, the league can make mistakes. Hell, Bruce Arians had to wait 25 years before he got a head coaching job. And there's a lot of reasons why. He was a little rough around the edges. He wouldn't trim it up, despite the fact that he had that. Bruce Arians, he probably wouldn't have got a head coaching job if Chuck Pagano hadn't gotten cancer, quite honestly. That was his first opportunity, and he just did so well that Arizona had no choice but to hire him. The whole thing with Eric Bieniemy is he's interviewed with a large portion of the league. So a large portion of the league, they know they don't want Eric Bieniemy to be their offensive coordinator or head coach. And we'll see what happens with Eric Bieniemy. The whole thing with Pep Hamilton before this year, we kept saying, well, he hasn't been an offensive coordinator in a long time. What's going on? Why hasn't he gotten the opportunity since he was in Indianapolis? And then we saw him call plays and it didn't work out. So maybe the league knew what they were doing there. I don't know what's going to happen with Bieniemy. We all know that Andy Reid is the one who is calling those plays. Mike Kafka, they did not want to lose. Mike Kafka went and proved himself, and he could end up being the coach in Arizona. So that might just have to be what Bieniemy does. But I don't, I think at some point we got to just think, a lot of the league has interviewed Eric Bieniemy, and for whatever reason, they don't think that he is an offensive guru or an offensive mastermind. Maybe it's possible. I don't know. Maybe he does the Bruce Arians route and he goes and proves himself and he takes advantage of the opportunity. But I don't know. I'm intrigued by the Slowick and Kingsbury thing. I don't know what's going to happen with Eric Bieniemy. Arthur says, the same way I asked about D'Amico, if Kliff comes aboard, does he tempt some players to possibly come to Houston? Maybe. I'm not sure. I have no idea on that. I do think this is going to be a pretty intriguing free agent destination, to say the very least. And just the fact, again, my biggest takeaway from this Kingsbury and Slowick thing is that just the fact that we're talking about these two names as potential play callers is very encouraging. And if we look back, like just the entire offseason, the grudge matches we've seen for these positions, it's been A-list. It's been main event caliber. You had D'Amico Ryans, who everyone wanted. You had the very popular assistants in Shane Steichen and Mike Kafka, both of which could end up getting the final two openings. I know Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid have spoken very highly of Mike Kafka and his role in the offense in Kansas City the last few years, as well as his role in developing Patrick Mahomes. And we saw he brought the Giants to middle of the road offense from dead last. And Daniel Jones is now getting talked about as someone who's going to get paid. So we could see Kafka, a Texans candidate, end up getting a head coaching job. And Shane Steichen, some feel Shane Steichen could be a guy that the Indianapolis Colts look at, although I saw that Shaq Leonard yesterday endorsed Jeff Saturday. Sign me up for the Jeff Saturday decision, but many believe that Shane Steichen is eventually going to be the guy. So just the fact that we've had these grudge matches, and you sprinkle in Jonathan Gannon, you sprinkle in Evero and all these other names, Sean Payton interviewed for the gig. The grudge matches are what's the beautiful part of it, because the last couple of seasons, for whatever reason, the other circumstances, we haven't been dealing with a situation where we're even talking about these types of candidates. Like there are people, and I think it's great, no matter what side you fall on it, there are people that don't want Kliff Kingsbury to call the offense. Kliff Kingsbury last year, he would have been possibly like the best name for the head coach opening. Think about that. If you put Bobby Slowick, let's just take Bobby Slowick, 35 years old, unproven, passing game coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. Let's not even talk about offensive coordinator. Let's put Bobby Slowick and Kliff Kingsbury. And I know they got flaws, and I don't want either one of them to be a head coach at this point. But let's put those guys in the middle of a Jonathan Gannon, Josh McCown battle to be the head coach. Some people would be making a case for both of those guys. And now we're talking about them calling the offense. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. Just the fact we're having these conversations is great. There's a point counterpoint. If my dream scenario would be that Kliff Kingsbury's on the staff and Bobby Slowick's calling plays, and Kliff Kingsbury's kind of that head coach that maybe can learn from his mistakes and can kind of help D'Amico Ryans out. He's definitely not someone you want as your head coach. You don't want a head coach who's encouraged cell phone use in meetings and stuff like that. Players don't immediately get on their best behavior with Kliff Kingsbury. But he can maybe develop, he can maybe grow, and he can be a nice presence in that locker room. But it's D'Amico's squad. But if you get both of those guys in the building, I think you can do a lot worse. So it's insane, the names that we've been talking about. Just the fact that Kliff Kingsbury is even a topic, or Bobby Slowick, that's crazy. And the other thing is, what if they decide on someone else besides these guys? I mean, that would be almost more encouraging than both of those, because both of those names, Slowick and Kingsbury, because then you're looking at a situation where, my goodness, they thought someone was better than the two prime candidates for the OC gig. Times are changing around here. It's really wild. As Richard puts it, never thought I'd see these names being linked to the Texans, and I'm all for it. Feels like a big change is upon us. It's definitely upon us. Hugh says they need a QB tall enough to read defenses. Okay, let me ask you this. Did you ever watch Bryce Young and feel like he couldn't read a defense? I've yet to hear a scout say that there's any issue with Bryce Young reading defenses. As a matter of fact, I've heard the opposite when it comes to Bryce Young. That the makeup that he has upstairs, his ability to read defenses, the timeliness, all that type of stuff, that's his strength. Now, Kyler Murray, his issues are not ability to read defense. And if that's his issue, it's not because he's short. Like Drew Brees can read defenses. It's not because he's short. You're saying you can't see over there. I haven't seen Bryce Young have trouble seeing. At every level he's been, people have talked about his intangibles and all that type of stuff. Kyler Murray has other issues. It's not because he's short. So we're setting ourselves up now to where if Bryce Young doesn't work out, even if it has nothing to do with height, we're going to immediately say, oh, see, told you he was too small. Or if he gets hurt, see, told you he was too small. Joe Burrow tore his ACL his first year in the league. I mean, quarterbacks get hurt. So I don't know where we're getting this. Like, you're going to have to tell me why you think Bryce Young can't read defenses. I don't see that. KC007 says Kliff knows Young and offered him a scholarship. Either you get a QB or not, and they'll see you can't move forward without a QB. Kliff is simple to learn it. Yeah, he did offer him a scholarship at Texas Tech. So yeah, Cebu asking whose responsibility is it hiring the rest of the coaching staff, D'Amico, the coordinators, Nick and Cal. I think it's an effort with D'Amico and Caserio, but he has a very, very D'Amico does a lot of the heavy lifting there. AG Dillo, why is no one advocating a trade down to 4 or 8? Take whichever entirely draftable QB is left and get several high round picks. I don't agree with the philosophy of take the draftable QB. I think that's silly. I think anytime you get in a situation where you just say, we'll take whatever quarterback is there, that's where you find trouble. That's why in 1998, the Arizona Cardinals gave up 2 firsts and a second to move up and get whichever quarterback wasn't selected between Ryan Leaf and Peyton Manning. That's where the Jets, they feel like, oh, we're not going to get Trevor Lawrence. We'll take Zach Wilson. Dan Snyder says, we're not going to get Andrew Luck. We're going to trade up and get RG3. If you're going to trade back, just get the best players possible. But I'm not desperate enough right now. And quite frankly, I trust the process enough right now to where if you just get the best players possible and you stockpile all these picks and then you need to find your quarterback later and see who can hold down the fort, sign me up for that instead of, hey, let's just get this quarterback. If this guy's there, that's where you get in trouble. That's where you trade up for Blaine Gabbert at the end of 10. That's where you say, oh, let's trade up for Paxton Lynch. I just don't subscribe to that theory. Take the draftable quarterback. I think that's a dangerous draft for need type of mindset that, quite frankly, a team like the Texans that have so many problems and so many holes, I don't think that's a healthy mindset for them to have. And I'm hoping that they don't do that. MB, what's up? He says, would you give Mills another shot with a new OC and then use the second pick, trade down a couple spots, still get one of the defensive players and build from there? Look, I know nobody that had to watch it all of last week and or last season, and the people who didn't, welcome aboard. Locker Room, Texans Daily Digital Content, Landry Locker, 10 to 2 Sports Radio 610. Subscribe, like, ride along. Welcome back. Your voices were heard, and now things are looking up. I think Cal Hanna took notice of your absence. But anyone who watched Davis Mills, you're not going to sit there and say, I believe Davis Mills is going to be a franchise quarterback, unless your last name is Mills. But I like that mindset a hell of a lot more than let's just draft a quarterback, just to draft a quarterback. What were we saying about Daniel Jones last year before Brian Dable came? Trusted the right guy in Mike Kafka to completely control the offense. And Mike Kafka was controlling the entire offense. That was common knowledge. He was calling the plays, all that type of stuff. And they went from bottom of the league to middle of the league. And now is Daniel Jones worth $35 million? Is he worth $40 million? We were talking about him just like Davis Mills. So I'm not encouraging it. And there's a strong chance they like Stroud and Bryce Young. And they're not just settling. And they think very highly of both of those guys. And if they get the quarterback and they want to make him a face of the franchise, that's the best case scenario. But I like that mindset of let's get the best team possible if we trade down instead of, whichever quarterback falls to us. Because if there's an organization that just says, let's just get a quarterback, do you really trust them? Because with a position like that and the attention that goes into scouting a quarterback and the systems that you're going to have, if you look at all these quarterbacks, you can say a lot of them got different skill sets. I mean, would you really trust an organization that just says, if Levis falls to us, we'll take him, but we really like Bryce Young? It's kind of a wide gap, isn't it? I don't want to be married to a system. I don't want to be BOB, but that's kind of a wide gap there. It's a really wide gap. So we'll see what happens. Bryce Young did not have the squad around him that CJ Stroud had this year. I know that Alabama, I'm not going to sit here and say boo-hoo Alabama, they didn't have a team. They had some really good players in Gibbs. They got some guys that are going to develop. But as far as the offensive line, as far as the philosophy and stuff, he was having to do a lot of it on his own. CJ Stroud, like Ohio State's offense and the talent they have on offense is superior to what they have at Alabama. Just especially on the offensive side of the rock. So this is the one time where you really just can't hold, or you can do whatever you want, but I wouldn't hold the Alabama offense against Bryce Young because I think CJ had as much around him. The other thing is I'm not bringing in Kliff Kingsbury with the quarterback in mind. I'm thinking he can work with either quarterback, but the dream scenario is both of those guys on the staff, and you're compiling an impressive staff. It's not like Kliff Kingsbury doesn't already have the money. Some wonder, how much does he want to coach? I don't know. He went to Thailand. I mean, he went to Thailand after the season. Like, what's he supposed to do? Sit there and fill out his resume? The whole Thailand thing was pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Joe says, Landry, we're going to start calling you Berman with all the work you've been putting in. Congrats on your recent life news, by the way. Shout out to the Loopholes. Shout out to the Loopholes. If you listen, you are one. Sports Radio 610, show of record, in the loop, 10 to 2, Monday through Friday. No one will ever outwork Mark Berman, though. Mark Berman is the absolute GOAT of Houston media. Cebu would rather have Driscoll than Mills. Yeah, let's not even do that. That's not gonna go down. But a lot of people, hell no on Mills. Yeah, I'm not wanting Mills, but I would rather do that than just draft a quarterback. If you have a specific quarterback, give me the quarterback. Because that's the thing, that it's going to be different when it comes to the quarterback, but just draft a quarterback just to draft a quarterback? Why at this point? Now, if you think they can it's worth a shot, like the Jets, where they missed on Zach Wilson and they're still fine, they're still a quarterback away, okay. But just draft a quarterback just to draft a quarterback? Why? Got plenty of draft equity. You got an easy schedule. That's the other thing about this. The schedule. I threw these stats out last week. You're going to have 5 coaches in the first year with their team. You're going to have only 5 playoff teams from last season. One of them's Tampa Bay, who had a losing record and a minus 45 point differential, and they just lost Tom Brady. So just 5 playoff teams from last year, 5 teams with coaches coaching in their first season, including Sean Payton. That's going to be a grudge match. And you have 10 uncertain quarterback situations. You're facing the AFC or the NFC South. They don't know who their quarterbacks are. So they're kind of in similar situations right now as the Texans quarterback wise. So as far as competing next year, do you need a rookie quarterback? I don't know. I just know that all these quarterbacks, the situations, Carolina, Atlanta, New Orleans looks like they're going to find Derek Carr, Tampa Bay, the Colts, the Titans. You have 10 teams that you have no idea who their quarterback's going to be. No idea. So you can figure that situation out. It goes back to the quarterback. Once we get the OC, then the quarterback stuff intensifies. Allerton's asking about Hendon Cooker. He says he'll be healthy by July. I'll believe that when I see it. I know Kyler's not going to be ready to go until mid-season. I think they tore their ACLs around the same time. Hendon's also 25 years old. I don't know if that matters to you or not, but he's 25 years old. He's a rookie. He's coming off a torn ACL. If you want to kick the tires on Hendon as a backup and let him grow and develop, that's cool. But being ready by July to just be full go, I think that would be kind of reckless. I think he's the kind of guy that you would want to bring in and maybe take your time with. I mean, if you draft a quarterback in the first round and you have those extra third-round picks and Hendon Hooker's there, why not? But I don't think you abandon drafting a quarterback and say, let's bring in Hendon. If Hendon's going to be the guy, you're going to have a veteran option or maybe even a young option who's ready to go. So that's just where we're at right now. The beauty of it is we're talking about Kliff Kingsbury and Bobby Slowick. Again, Seth Payne laid out the best case against. The case for, a lot of uncertainty. I don't know if there's anything tangible to make a case for Kliff Kingsbury, depending how you look at it. But he's never been a coordinator in the NFL. just a coordinator. So there is that. Subscribe, like, follow along. We'll do a little Super Bowl one tomorrow. We'll look through the localized lenses. Maybe we'll have an OC hire by then. Who knows? Maybe the Texans are just going to news dump on a Sunday like Jerry Jones would. Maybe stuff is really changing. Remember when Jerry Jones fired Kellen Moore during kickoff of the NFC Championship game? Maybe the Texans will do that. Who knows? But no matter what they do, no matter who they hire, appreciate you all for coming through. It's a fun time to be a Texans fan. It's going to be real fun, though, when the clock hits 0 on the Super Bowl, because then the slate is wiped clean. This season is done. We can completely look ahead. Right now, we're still having to live in the season. So you're talking about all these squads, completely going to look ahead, and that's when we start sprinting during this offseason. The most exciting offseason in Texans history, right along in the locker room, daily digital content, Houston Texans style, right along on In the Loop on Sports Radio 610 from 10 to 2. Hell, right along from 6A to 6P. Seth, Sean, me, the OG, John Lopez, and Figgy Fig. And then the drive with Clint Sterner, Ron the Show, Hughley, and Tyler Milner. No matter what happens, no matter who the OC is, if Coach Bro comes or Coach Bro goes, we are all in this together. What a fun time to be alive. Have an awesome weekend. Have an awesome Super Bowl Sunday. Go get your groceries now, because it's going to be a madhouse tomorrow. Have a good one, people. We're all in it together.